Hi everyone and welcome back. In this video we're going to be discussing the while loop and the do while loop and comparing that to the for loop, which we learned in a prior video. And by the end of it you should have a better understanding of both and also get a practical example of how to use that in your projects. Now with the for loop, to just kind of summarize what we learned in the previous videos, is that with a for loop is when you have a better idea of how many iterations you want to run a certain amount of code. So this you can think of as, climbing up stairs, for instance. You know how many steps it's going to take to get to the top of the stairs. That's a type of example you would think of when you want to run a loop or repeat some code a certain number of times. Now with a while loop, that's when you're going to not know how many times you need to repeat an action, and it's based on something that might change over time, so you're really not sure. And that you can think of as waiting for something, like you're waiting at a bus stop and you want to keep checking if the bus has arrived. You don't know how long it's going to take, but it's eventually going to get there. So that's more of a case for a while loop. And oftentimes if you can make a for loop, a lot of times you can make a while loop, even though it might be better in one instance or the other. You generally, especially when you're first starting off, you can typically turn a for loop into a while loop and vice versa. So we're going to talk about that. Now with the for loop, I have an example here of the structure, and we talked about this in a prior video, but with the for loop, you have within the parentheses 3 parts that you need for every for loop. You need the starting point, or the initialization, which is a variable, and that's often going to be I for the index, and it typically will start at 0, but it can start at anything you'd like, a starting point. Then you have the condition, and that's going to be, essentially how things, the ending point of your loop. So you've got the starting point, you've got it, you want to keep running this for how long until, let's say the initialization was you're starting at 0 and you want to increment that count by 1 until you reach 5, let's say. So you can say as long as the variable is less than or equal to 5, you want to keep incrementing that initialization variable. So that's the condition. So starting point, end point, and then you've got the update. So update is, you can think of as the step counter. How many steps you'd like to take to get to the end point. So how do you want to get there? And for beginners, you might start off with just doing plus or incrementing by 1 if you were just doing a count from 0 to 5 like we were discussing. Now with a while loop, it's going to be a little bit different in structure, but a lot of it could be similar, especially when you're just starting off. And so I want to bring that up here to discuss a bit further. So with the while loop, you have this structure, and the way I like to think of it is, for the for loop, it's more like left to right, and for those 3 parts, and then for the while loop, it is top to bottom for those 3 parts. So you'll see that here, the initialization, the condition, and the update, it's all on a horizontal line. Now with the while loop, it's going to be more vertical. And so how this works is you're going to start with that initialization, then you're going to write the condition, and that's going to be in parentheses after the while word. After declaring that word, you'll put the condition, and then followed by curly braces, and within the curly braces you're going to put the update. So the structure is different in a little bit, but when you start to write them more, it'll make more sense. But to just get an idea of it, think of there's always 3 parts in general. You'll have the starting point, the end point, and then how you get yourself working up to that end point. And so that's what we have here. And then with the do while loop, and we'll bring that up, it's going to be pretty similar. The do while loop, the difference between these two is that the do while loop allows you to run the code at least once without checking if the condition has been completed yet. So the do while loop is used when you want to make sure you can run the code at least once, and we're going to go over some examples, and then check the condition, versus the while might not even run the code between the curly braces. It might just end. And so that's what we're seeing here. And so we're going to go over some examples of these types, and we can hop over to our sandbox environment, and we can touch on the first one here and dive into it a little bit more. So this first one is just a normal while loop. So, we have the initialization. We start at a count of 1. We want to increment up until 5. So while the count is less than or equal to 5, we want to increment. And then we want to give back that count in the console as we are incrementing. And then once we hit this condition, we want to stop the while loop and jump out of it. And so that we can see in the console, like so. We'll see count as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then stop. And so that is a while loop. And what we can see is, let's say this count was 6. You'll see that nothing runs. And that's the power of the do while loop, is that we can at least get one item to run. But in this case, nothing's going to run because the condition has already been complete. It's already been met, so there's no reason to run anything. So now let's hop to the next example, the do while loop. And the do while loop is going to run at least once, as we can see here. So we're setting the number to 10, so it's the same initialization. We want to do some code first, and we're going to say, this will run at least once in the console. We want to increment that number, and then we want to keep doing this until the number is, while the number is less than 5. So as long as it's less than 5, we want to keep running this. In this case, the number is 10, so it's already exceeding 5, but the code is still going to run at least once, and that's why we see that text in the console. If we were to go ahead and just say the number was 1, we're going to see that this runs those 4 times until it's no longer less than 5. And you'll see that number 4 next to the text. Now, in terms of a practical example that I want to discuss is this one right here. And we're going to break this down so we can understand it some more. Now, with this example, and let's go ahead and close this so we can see it. So with this example, essentially what we're doing is, the benefit of the do while is, like I mentioned, you get to run code at least once. And this could be beneficial, especially if you have a website. Let's say, for instance, you want to get someone's rating on their experience of visiting the website, or checking out a product, whatever it is, you want to get their rating. So essentially what we're doing is, you want to keep asking to get their rating until they leave one that's a valid rating. Otherwise, keep showing it, and if once they complete it, then we'll be done. So you'll see here, essentially what we're doing is, do this prompt, rate your experience from 1 to 5, while the rating is a valid rating. And if the rating is not is valid, then you get alert saying thanks for your rating. Otherwise, feedback skipped. So if we choose not to do it, so if we give back a invalid number, let's say 6, we're going to get the pop-up again. If we give 8, we'll still get the pop-up. If we get 5, it's going to say thanks for your rating. Now, if we refresh it again and we cancel, we're going to say feedback skipped right here.